What's happening? Why is there, like, this used to be the type of thing that, like, cringe-ass Noam Chomsky or someone in the fucking margins like myself would bring up. I have never seen, this is the first time in all of the 9/11s that I have experienced. This is the first year where I've seen mainstream media, AOC, and Bernie Sanders talk about Chile's 9/11. It is very shocking to me. Okay. Speaking of 9/11, and this is going to be the last part of the 9/11 saga. Now that we've covered every part of this. There's another 9/11 that happened before the 9/11 that happened in America. And of course, just like Zay Squirrel, let's go to Noam Chomsky.
The case that you were making about...
Wait, where the fuck? That's not it. This is not the right one. Called the first 9/11.
When we talk about terrorism, it means what they do to us, not what we do to them. And what they do to us can be pretty ugly, although it's not even a fraction of what we do to them. I mean, take, say, 9/11. That was a pretty serious act of terrorism, maybe the worst single act of terrorism in history. But it could have been worse. I mean, suppose, for example, that Al-Qaeda had bombed Washington, bombed the White House. It killed the president, installed a harsh military dictatorship, brought in a bunch of economists who drove the economy into its worst disaster in history. Well, that would have been worse than 9/11. And I'm not making it up. It happened. What's called the first 9/11 in South America, namely in Chile.
On the 11th of September 1973, the democratically elected Chilean president Salvador Allende was overthrown in a coup. A dictatorship under Augusto Pinochet was established that ruled Chile until 1990.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Dissidents. Thousands were imprisoned and murdered.
Who was involved in that first 9/11? It's not hard to find them. Right in Washington and London and so on. But that's off the agenda.
Let's go to the first 9/11.
And women as part of the resistance.
The absence of our relatives, this is an act of homage to women who have been
leadership. For the rest of the show, we're joined by Ariel Dorfman, who served as a cultural advisor to Salvador Allende from 1970 to 1973.
1 second.
After the coup, Ariel Dorfman went into exile. Today, he's recognized as one of Latin America's greatest writers. His essays, novels, poems, and plays have been translated into more than 40 languages. His new piece in The Nation today is headlined 50 years after the other 9/11, remembering the Chilean coup. His opinion essay in the New York Times is headlined, I Watched a Democracy Die. I Don't Want to Do It Again. His new novel is just out. It's called The Suicide Museum. Professor Dorfman, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, though this is a very solemn day, this commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the U.S.-backed coup, backed by Nixon, backed by Kissinger, backed by ITT. If you can talk about what happened on that day. You were in Chile. In fact, when were you last in the Moneda? When had you last seen Salvador Allende before he died on this day in 1973?
First, Amy, I'd like to thank you for having me on this day of mourning and defiance and also resistance and memory. As to how I lived the coup, it turns out that I was supposed to be at La Moneda that morning and dawn. I was supposed to have slept the night there because that was one of the ideas. You had turns where you're supposed to receive the news, whether there was a coup happening. And I switched places with one of my dear friends, who in fact was captured at La Moneda on the 11th. He was tortured and then executed. So I'm in a sense survivor because of him, or at least so I felt all these years, as I explain in the Suicide Museum, my novel. A series of other circumstances meant that I didn't get there because I slept at my home on the 10th at the evening instead of sleeping at the La Moneda. And when I was supposed to be called by the minister I was serving, sort of the chief of staff of President Allende, called on a list. And nobody called me. And so I woke up much later and I wasn't able to get to La Moneda.
2 years since 9/11. But prior to our 9/11 here in the United States, on September...
What's happening? Why is there, like, this used to be the type of thing that, like, cringe-ass Noam Chomsky or someone in the fucking margins like myself would bring up. I have never seen, this is the first time in all of the 9/11s that I have experienced. This is the first year where I've seen mainstream media, AOC, and Bernie Sanders talk about Chile's 9/11. It is very shocking to me. Where is this coming from? I guess it's like 50 years past. That's why, right? Like, look, AOC.
It's Rep AOC. We are actually coming up on the 50th anniversary of a brutal coup that happened in Chile. But I actually wanted to talk to you about the fact that the U.S. was actually involved in that coup and what we can do today and in the future in order to change our history of U.S. foreign policy in Latin America. 50 years ago, Chile had elected a leftist president. His name was Salvador Allende. Now, at the time, Salvador Allende had proposed major sweeping changes for the people of Chile. He proposed, for example, nationalizing the...
Bernie was talking about it a long time ago. No, Bernie Sanders makes sense. That's why I said mainstream media. I remember this old video of him describing, but this is like before 9/11, chat.
But if you check American history, you know, sometimes the president will tell you, well, we are always defenders of freedom.
Like, this is literally before, this predates America's 9/11, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen this many people like openly talk about 9/11.
The Chilean copper reserves, which then started to really threaten U.S. interests in addition to the backdrop of the Cold War. And the United States really did not like that. President Nixon and Henry Kissinger, two people that are notorious for interventionist foreign policy, decided that they were going to support a military leader known as Augusto Pinochet. And that leader conducted a coup against a democratically elected...
AOC should have fucking used like the conspiracy theory music in the background of this. That would have banged way harder, you know what I mean? Because like TikTok only responds to conspiracy theory music. So honestly, what you're supposed to do in that situation is, even if you're saying something truthful, just fucking pepper in that dumbass conspiracy theory music so that the dumbass Zoomers will believe you. You know what I mean?
Elected president. Over 40,000 Chileans went missing. They were murdered, tortured, imprisoned, and it has become just an enormous part of Chilean society. People to this day still don't know what happened to their family members. What does this really have to do with the U.S. beyond our interventionist policy? For a very long time, we did not fess up to our role in this, and we did not declassify documents. When I recently visited President Boric in Chile, we discussed the U.S. declassification of what the CIA knew, what the State Department knew, what the House knew, and what then President Nixon knew about the Chilean coup. Now, we've actually made a major breakthrough in this case thanks to lots of organizing, agitation, diplomacy, and work, and some of the first documents have been declassified. Those are two of the president's daily briefs, what Nixon saw leading up to the coup. However, these documents are still a drop in the bucket, and we have major outstanding questions, from a closed-door CIA director testimony to the United States House of Representatives to many, many documents at the State Department as well as the CIA. we actually do need to pay attention to not just U.S. relationships in Latin America, but why Latin America is shaped the way that it is today. We need to ask ourselves, why do migrants come to the United States? Why do people seek refuge in the United States? Why does the U.S. have certain relationships in Latin America the way that we do? And a lot of it has to do with our history of foreign policy. And if the average everyday American doesn't understand or isn't informed about U.S. foreign policy, then how can we develop solutions to things like...
Okay, now I can actually understand and trust what AOC is saying.
Our migration crisis. How can we make sure that we have economic agreements that do well by workers both in the U.S. and abroad? And most importantly, how do we show up as a trustworthy partner that can advance democracy in the present day if we don't own up to a complicated past?
That's right. The real 9/11 happened 50 years ago. I'm not talking about the 9/11 where holographic planes actually hit the fake World Trade Center, where 3,000 supposed Americans died on 9/11/2001. There's no living record of the 9/11 victims. Their families were all made up by the federal government. The real 9/11 happened in Chile 50 years ago, where the American government decided to institute a coup d'etat on the democratically elected democratic socialist government of Salvador Allende. Here, okay, I got one more. Okay, I got one more. Hold on. Here are the last words of Salvador Allende. The Air Force has bombed the towers of Radio Portales and Radio Corporación. These are my last words. My words are not bitter, but disappointed. May they be a moral condemnation of those who have betrayed their oath. Soldiers of Chile, titular commanders-in-chief. Admiral Marino, who has designated himself, and Mr. Mendoza, the despicable general. Who only yesterday pledged fidelity and loyalty to the government, and has now appointed himself Director General of the Carabineros. Given the situation, all I can do is let the workers know I will not resign. Placed at a historic juncture, my loyalty to the people will cost me my life. And to them, I say that I am sure that the seed we have planted in the good conscience of thousands and thousands of Chileans cannot be cut down forever. They have the power to overwhelm us, but social movements cannot be stopped by crime. Or by force. History is ours. The people make history. Workers of my country, I want to thank you for the loyalty you've always shown, for the confidence you put in a man who was merely an interpreter of great yearnings for justice, who gave his word to respect the Constitution and the law and did just that. And this definitive moment, the last time I can address you, at this definitive moment, I hope you will learn this lesson. Foreign capital, imperialism, and their consequences created a climate in which the armed forces betrayed tradition. The tradition taught by General Schneider and reaffirmed by Commander Araya, victims of the same social sector, who will be in their homes today hoping, with foreign assistance, to retake power and continue defending their profits and privileges. I speak to, above all, the modest woman of our land, to the peasant woman who believed in us, to the working woman who worked harder, to the mother who knew our concern for her children. I speak to the professionals of the nation, the patriotic professionals, those who, days ago, continued working against the sedition sponsored by the professional associations, class-based associations that also defend the advantages that a capitalist society grants to a few. I speak to the youth, those who sang and gave us their joy and their spirit of struggle. I speak to the man of Chile, the worker, the farmer, the intellectual, to those who will be persecuted because fascism has already been active in our country for many hours. In terrorist attacks, blowing up bridges, cutting railroad lines, destroying the oil and gas pipelines. Amid silence from those who were supposed to defend them, they were committed. History will judge them. Surely, Radio Magallanes will be silenced, and the calm metal of my voice will no longer reach you. No matter, you will continue to hear it. I will always be with you, or at least my memory will be that of dignified man, that of a man who was loyal to the workers. The people must defend themselves, but not sacrifice themselves. The people must not be destroyed or riddled with bullets. Workers of my country, I have faith in Chile and its destiny. Other men will overcome this gray and bitter moment in which betrayal seeks to impose itself. Go forward, knowing that much sooner rather than later, the great avenues through which free men pass will open again to build a better society. Long live Chile, long live the people, long live the workers. These are my final words, and I am certain that my sacrifice will not be in vain. I am certain, at least, that it will be a moral lesson that will punish felony, cowardice, and treason. But of course, fascism thrived, and an American dickhead college boys rewrote the Chilean constitution. Although, silver lining is that Chile has more union participation at 15% than the United States of America, which is sitting currently at 10%. So, you know. And Kissinger is still alive and free. Other notable thing is that his body was found with an AK-47 shot in the head, and they claim it was suicide. Yeah. Sad that Chile became the fucking laboratory of the worst neoliberal politics. Fuck CIA, fuck Pinochet, fuck Chicago boys, fuck Milton Friedman, and fuck Hayek while we're at it. America has fucked every leftist government in the world, even the democratically elected one. They did the same thing in Kerala and in India. Yeah. America has fucked every leftist government in the world, even the democratically elected one. They did the same thing in Kerala and in India. Yeah. Chilean here. There's a famous video of a soldier shooting the camera crew who was filming the bombardment of the palace of the government. If we took 1 minute of silence for every confirmed death during the dictatorship, we'd be in silence for almost 3 days, not counting the missing people. I think Pedro Pascal is supposed to be related to Allende, right? Makes him even cooler. AOC came a few weeks ago to learn more about this. It's very important for us. This is why it's a myth that America defends democracy. America only cares about capital interests. As soon as Allende nationalized Chile's extraction industry was set in stone, the CIA set up a coup. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's just... Allende's weapon had been given to him as a gift by Fidel Castro, who bore a gold-plate engraved to my friend and comrade in arms, Fidel Castro. NPR's Planet Money justifies Pinochet's fascist coup and mass violence as justified for the sake of neoliberalism. There ain't no fucking way. In the early 70s, Chile, under Marxist President Salvador Allende, was plagued by inflation shortages and a crushing deficit. After a violent coup in 1973, the economy became the military's problem. Led by Augusto Pinochet, the military assigned a group of economists to help turn Chile's economy around. They had trained at the University of Chicago. They became known as the Chicago Boys. Today's show is about the economic shock treatment they launched. It eventually set Chile on a path to prosperity, but it did so at an incredible human cost, one that Chileans are still grappling with today. I love that they said it eventually set Chile on a path to prosperity. But this is, of course, yet again, another instance where the outlets like NPR, which you expect to be liberal, and they are liberal, will absolutely defend fascists because it aligns with America's interests overseas. This was an atrocity that needed to happen because, listen, you can't have Latin American countries on a continent that has direct access by land, even if it's far away, to the United States of America that has leanings, socialist leanings. Oh, this was Pascal's punk. Pedro Pascal posted about the missing and the dead. NPR called it unintended consequences. Yeah, so this is the official narrative, that the United States simply set the stage for a coup in Chile, and that they didn't like personally facilitate it. If you look at like neoliberal forums that want to defend the Pinochet administration, the Pinochet dictatorship, they will always say, "Oh, like it's just we didn't directly do the coup; it just happened. I didn't start the fire; I just bought the matches and lit them, and set up the Kinder on the ground." But yeah, today in Chilean Congress, there was a moment to remember and honor Allende, and the right-wing parties just fucking left the Congress. Clowns. I mean, don't they also kind of have like people directly related to Pinochet? Like they had Pinochet's like grandson or something that the BBC mysteriously interviewed as a random guy when they were looking at Boric reforms. And they were like, here's how they are being... Here's how the election is being perceived on the ground. Yeah, here it is. Thank you, BBC News, for finding these everyday Chilean voters to discuss whether Chileans really want the socialist leader they just elected. And yes, they are related. Gonzalo Pinochet, a cast voter. The U.S. also supported fascist leader Francisco Franco in Spain throughout his regime. You don't understand, man. They just happen to be against something that is much, much scarier. Okay? And that is socialism, or people voting for socialist policies. I don't think you understand. That's like way scarier, okay? It would be really bad. Socialism never worked, and it will never work, and that's why we have to keep doing everything we can to ensure it never works, and then keep claiming that it will never work on its own. Unless we allow like different degrees of socialization happening by like Western allies that we aren't cooing, but at least like keeping on a tight leash. who are also aligned with our interests regardless. Then socialization, certain aspects of socialization is allowed to work, especially if it's given as a concession to the public in order to stop them from joining forces with the USSR. Like, especially then it's like kind of allowed. You know what I mean? Like not super allowed, kind of allowed. You can be allowed to have certain aspects of socialization, not socialism. But even then, you have to be aligned with the U.S. interests. But to be fair, to be very fair, while America sits in the imperial core, we don't even do this shit to our own people. Okay? We have, one, domestic colonies. And no, I'm not talking about territories. I'm talking straight up like, we have areas of the United States that are seen as domestic or operated like domestic colonies. We also do a tremendous amount of like brutal military violence to our own people, certain people. Okay. We have a permanent underclass in the form of our prison industrial complex. So like, we literally do that to ourselves as well. Like, America would be awfully hypocritical if it didn't fuck its own citizens on a regular basis. Now, they might still benefit from being in the imperial core. There might still be a labor aristocracy, right? That much is certainly still true. America still offers crumbs to its own citizens for the most part.